For those of you who are joining us for the first time or are new to the Tech Council, the San Francisco Tech Council is a multi-sector initiative, and we build government, business, nonprofit, and consumer collaboration to advance digital inclusion for seniors and adults with disabilities in San Francisco so all can participate in the city's connected community. So that brings us to today's agenda, the focus on racial equity. And this is the first in a series of meetings that we'll be hosting to apply an equity-driven framework to advance digital inclusion in San Francisco, especially focusing on communities of color and widening disparities in light of the COVID pandemic. Gissela Moya, who is from the Greenlining Institute, which is based in Oakland. It's a policy, research, organizing, and leadership institute working for racial and economic justice. And Gissela will share some research from their technology equity work, highlighting how communities of color have been affected by digital redlining and experience limited availability of broadband services, and when those services are available, a poor level of service quality and reliability.
Okay, awesome. So as you mentioned, Andrew, I am part of the Greenlining Institute, and we are located in Oakland. And in case you're not familiar with us, we focus on many policy areas, including technology. And overall, though, we do envision a nation where communities of color thrive and race is never a barrier to economic opportunity. I'm particularly really excited to be here, especially because this is an issue that impacts my own family. For, I don't know, more than 6 years, my family hasn't had internet access at home. They're currently in SoCal. So with the pandemic, this has been like a very hard situation for many of us. And as you can see, I have 6 nephews. So online learning, as that transition has happened, has been very hard on the family. And in the past years at Greenlining, I've been focusing on the digital divide in terms of like research and advocacy. So really thankful for y'all inviting me. There's no way that we can walk out of this year without understanding that internet access is simply an essential service at this point. I think for many years, internet access was seen as a luxury, as something that you should have, but not a must have. That if you don't have it, it's your own fault. And now we need it for almost everything, especially right now to apply for jobs. As more jobs have moved online, you have to submit almost everything online, especially for students, to complete their homework, to stay up with current news, and even to access telehealth, which has grown exponentially in the past year. But beyond that, I think we can also see internet access and internet services as a place where we can cope. We use Netflix and other platforms to distress. And that's something that everyone should have, especially for people who are going through really hard times right now, to have their support systems that have transitioned from in person to now online. And when we're talking about digital divide, I'm pretty sure you all know, but we're really talking about the inequity between those who have it and those who don't. And it's simply just not enough to have it, but it's really important to make sure that it's reliable, that it's affordable, and that it's fast. And this year, I had the opportunity to co-author a report called On the Wrong Side of the Digital Divide for the Greenlining Institute. And I had the opportunity to interview Fresno and Oakland residents about their internet situation. So I had to learn even more just what that looks like on the house. And I found, just common themes that I'm sure some of you have heard already. But in many places, broadband access is just unaffordable. So many families that I've spoken with simply paid for it, but doesn't mean that they can actually afford it, especially for families that are making less than $2,000. I was speaking with this high schooler from Fresno, where her mom was paying more than $150 for her internet service. And that was actually more than 10% of her monthly income. And even prior to the pandemic, she actually owed $600. because she had to have it to access online learning, she had to borrow a lot of money, and that was a common theme that I heard with that many families. And the sad reality is that when you don't have like the faster plan, you're stuck with really low service plans. And many families that I spoke with, had and knew about low cost essential plans. We've seen how so many of the solutions have been around. Let's just, give low income people like this $10 plan, and the digital divide will disappear. But when speaking with the families, we find that oftentimes those services are very inadequate and do not meet the needs of today's demand, especially as you have three people, working from home, and then you have like two children to also do their homework. It's just many times, like, trust me, many times low cost essential plans simply do not cut it. And we definitely have seen that as so many students have transitioned to online learning, and so many of them get bumped out of Zoom. So many get their education disrupted because they don't have a fast and reliable internet. And this is not by accident. This digital divide really, for me and for us, is just a symptom of racism, of structural just inequities throughout the country and through simply just the history of the US. And unfortunately, the outcomes of redlining, the historic practice of drawing red lines around communities of color to mark them off limits for loans and economic investments, are still felt today. And add that to, and hundreds of failed housing policy and education policies, racism, and it makes sense. It sadly why we're here today, and why beyond just this digital divide, it's also a racial divide and who gets impacted by this. So from the report that I mentioned earlier, we also looked at patterns of internet access or lack of access throughout California, and found that, though once we compare the maps, with old redlining maps and who has access today, they look awfully similar. So the map on the right, it pretty much visualizes a composite score of internet adoption, maximum speed, and as well as income, which is a proxy for ability to pay for internet access. And what you'll find is that, the places that were redlined on the left are still to this day now the places that have the lower adoption rates, that have the below average speeds, and overall usually have larger percentages of households of color. While the ones, that didn't have that historical barrier in getting loans or in having like faster and better investment through private companies, are now the ones that get to benefit from faster internet and overall affordable. And that what I showed you was the map of Oakland, but this is also something that we can transition to SF. The main difference of this map and the other one is that the purple dots represent households of color, like per census tract. So the bigger the dot, that means the higher percentage of people of color. And you can replicate this and see this throughout of the country and throughout California. The houses of color always get like the shorter end of the stick, and always are stuck with lower adoption rates or like lower speeds because of a huge lack of investment from the private and also from overall the public sector. And although redlining, is not something that anyone will admit in doing, private companies still continue doing it. Study after study has come out that, even AT&T usually prioritizes the higher income areas first before, letting or before deploying their faster internet service in lower income areas. And that really puts us at a disadvantage, because that leaves us into where we are today, where more than 60% of students lack adequate access to the internet are Black, Latinx, or Native American, where income as much as race, since this country has been so interrelated, can determine that California's wealthiest households are 16 times as likely to have access to home internet than the poorest ones. And it's a really unfair situation that it's going on that should not be happening to begin with. And we've seen a lot of the short-term solutions that mainly schools have been trying to adopt. And we've seen that even the digital divide this year, and in general, like just how urgent it has become, it definitely has been portrayed as a student issue, but it's not. You know, so many of our elders like need reliable internet to access telehealth, especially in rural areas where there might be a shortage of practitioners who might need to, you know, be in contact, who is, for example, let's say in the Bay Area, who can tell them what to do because there's a shortage in certain areas. And I was actually thinking today, it's like, you know, right now, a big reason why many households with children under 18 have been connected to the internet at higher rates now has to do with school policies that now let students take a computer home. That's something that I'm really hopeful for this year in terms of like either closing it more with what we've seen, a big surge of deployment of devices. But is this something that can be adapted by hospitals or by other healthcare centers, like to give it to patients? Is that a place where we can close it as well? And as we think about the short-term solutions, like we have to like keep in mind that this is a very, very, very big issue that will take many years, and it's not going to be like a one fits all solution. And we're going to have to continue like upgrading our current infrastructure, because what has happened, there are so many places that have internet or that have the infrastructure, but it is too old, and the communities around there just get stuck with really low quality internet. And overall, we're going to have to continue building more, building the places that currently either even they don't exist yet, or is just not where it's supposed to be to meet the demands of what we're currently going through. And that's it for today.
Well, thank you very much, Gissela. That was very interesting. Appreciate that. And as I say, we'll definitely be following up with you. So look forward to kind of future collaboration.